Your novel can be improved as much by removing things from it as it can be improved by adding things in. Sometimes a certain construct harms a novel so much that no amount of improvement in other areas will make the effects of that one thing go away. In these situations, the only reasonable approach is to simply get rid of the thing, and I'm going to share with you 3 of those potential things here today. These constructs are not necessarily bad in the sense that I can envision situations where you could use them effectively, but outside of those situations, or if you're using them without necessarily realizing that you're using them, they will drag your novel down. Speaking of dragging things down, I'm going to drag down my intro by asking you to subscribe if you haven't already. All right, the first thing to cut from your novel are large time skips. If you find through the course of your story that you're consistently jumping ahead by weeks or months or even years, if you have chapters that always begin with a month later, or if you're putting characters into situations that last for a few months and then you're jumping to the end of those situations, then that can be a problem if it's done too much. Now, a lot of novels take place over a long time span, and it's simply impractical to show every day of these long time spans. East of Eden is an example. I think it actually takes place over a couple of generations, and there are some significant time steps within that novel. The Count of Monte Cristo likewise takes place over a few decades, so this can be done well, but both of those novels have a compelling reason to use time skips, and I think they handle them pretty well for the most part. Every time you skip ahead by a few months in your story, you're pulling the reader out of a story that they've become familiar with and plunking them into somewhere unfamiliar. They then have to understand all the changes that have happened and get up to speed with the new situation they find themselves in. Also, when you summarize what's happened in those intervening months, you run the risk of glossing over exciting moments. To make these summaries interesting, you need to put something interesting in them, but doing that will make the reader curious about the scenes that they will get no further information about. So the character spent 6 months sailing across the ocean, was attacked by pirates twice, fought a kaiju, and met Poseidon, but we're not going to see any of that in the actual novel. Using a lot of large time skips might be a sign that your plot needs some tightening up. It may mean your story is too big to fit in one novel, or it may mean that you're trying to move characters through too many arcs or have too much character development happening. Shortening up the time horizon, if nothing else, will remove these jumps as a distraction from your novel. Next up, any scene where a character is alone. Now, there are some great novels with characters who spend a lot of time alone. There's nothing inherently wrong with having one character be the only person on stage. But scenes with only one character are more challenging to write, which means that these scenes will likely be of lower quality, and if you have a lot of these scenes in your novel, then it will also be of lower quality. When characters are alone, the writing is basically limited to describing the actions or the setting that the character is in, or describing what the character is thinking. Having a lot of scenes where a character is just sitting there navel gazing and pondering about different things does not usually make for compelling writing. 2 or more characters can have dialogue, which can be more engaging than just one character sitting there thinking. There's opportunity for conflict when you have multiple characters. You also have more intrigue because there's a non-viewpoint character whose motivations may not be entirely clear. We might not necessarily understand what they're doing or what they want. The best dynamics between characters occur between characters. While there are times when you need a character to be alone, you're missing an opportunity every time you do that. Every scene with just one character means that you aren't building relationships between the characters. You aren't characterizing the other characters who aren't in that scene. You also likely aren't advancing the plot a ton either if all you're doing is having a character think alone in a room with nobody else, as opposed to being alone in a room with other people. Which is actually a thing that happens, so I'm not going to correct that. There's a reason that Sherlock Holmes has Watson. There's a reason that Every single character who's going on a journey usually has traveling companions. Combining characters is where the magic happens, so do that as much as possible. Go through any scene in your novel that only has one character in it and see if you can either shorten that scene as much as possible or give them a friend to talk to. Because as we know in real life, you may not have any real friends, so the only friends you have are the ones you write about. And the last thing to remove, which is actually kind of a broad category of things, is any unneeded distraction or anything that draws readers' attention where you don't want it. Now, this could be almost anything from something that you do repeatedly in the prose to something in the setting to something that a character does. It could be the cat appearing 3/4 of the way through a video. It could be a plot hole, it could be an event that's mentioned early on in the story that the reader still has questions about. It could be a side character who's way more interesting than your protagonist that the reader wants to know more about. Really? You're going to appear in the video for 5 seconds and then leave. Basically, this just comes down to anything that the reader's attention is drawn to that you do not want their attention drawn to. This is like the why didn't they just fly the eagles to Mordor kind of thing. It's that annoying wart on your story that everyone looks at and talks about rather than actually talking about your story. It's like the shelf in the background of your video that isn't level. And yes, I know there are reasons the eagles couldn't fly the hobbits to Mordor, so please don't come after me. I'm giving a lot of examples here because this is such a broad idea that I want to kind of cover as many of the possibilities as I can. The only real way to find these things out is through critique partners or beta readers. If the people who read your novel are constantly asking questions about something that you don't want them asking questions about, then it's a distraction from your core story and should be addressed. Something in your novel is stealing the spotlight and you need to deal with it. If you don't realize that readers will be curious about something, it's unlikely that you're paying it off correctly. If you get a lot of negative feedback about it, or if the reader is confused about why you don't follow up on something or why some question doesn't get resolved, then that could be a real problem. Fixing this can happen in a few ways, and it will depend on the issue. Just removing whatever it is that's drawing attention will obviously fix this. You may need to plug some holes in your logic or better explain why something isn't being done. This can also be a sign that you've stumbled onto a much better idea that would make for a better story than what you initially intended. This could happen with a side character that's stealing the show, or it could happen with a side plot that's way more interesting than your main plot. In this case, you need to decide if the other angle is something that you want to pursue, or if you just want to remove the thing and not pursue it as the main thrust of your story. Just like it's time to stop pursuing this video because it's over. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all of my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.